Welcome to In the Seams, a podcast by Broken and Mended. And now your host, David Hefflin.
Well, hello and welcome you back to In the Seams. It's actually our first podcast of this year, so I hope all of you had a wonderful holiday season. I hope that your new year is off to a good start, despite I know the fact that many of our listeners, of course, the reason why they're listening to this show is they have challenges that can make some of these things difficult, including the holidays. But I hope and pray that you've been able to find blessings in the midst of your difficulties. I'm excited to have as my guest today Miles Washburn, and Miles is here to talk about his story with Guillain-Barré syndrome, and he'll help us if I need any extra help on the pronunciation there. But it's something I know that probably some of our listeners struggle with, and yet a lot of people might not even know what it is, and probably some people in between. I'm becoming educated on it myself as I've gotten to know Miles, and it is something that's a very difficult, incapacitating autoimmune disorder. He's going to tell us about it and what happened to him. But like so many of the stories that we have on this podcast, it doesn't just end in the event itself, but an inspiring story that will be a benefit to others has come out of that. And that's why Miles is here on the show, so he can share about that today. And I think it will help in two ways for those of you listening. Number one, for those who want to give to Miles's cause, which he'll tell us about, we certainly want to encourage that. And he'll explain that, where it goes, how it's used, all that kind of thing. But number two, just as important, is there may be people with GBS out there who are listening to this and need to know about the resource he's going to share with us. And I hope we'll just simply be inspired and encouraged by this story, and as a reminder that you're not alone in this. So Miles, want to just welcome you to the show and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, David. It's a real honor and a privilege to be here on your podcast. I'm looking forward to this, and I'm looking forward to helping to raise some awareness about the GBS CIDP Foundation and, of course, about GBS. Unfortunately, when you talk to most people, the common phrase of 9 out of 10 people have never heard of something. This is more like 999 out of 1,000 have never heard of GBS. And when I mention GBS, they go, "What? What's that?" And it turns into a long explanation.
Well, and I think even for me, I've been in chronic illness ministry since 2018, and I've heard of it, I've come across it, but to be truthful, I didn't have any understanding of it until you and I began talking. So I've already benefited from our conversations here off air. And even talking to you before today. So, a few minutes ago, basically, we were talking about how, everyone, before they have some kind of health crisis that changes their lives, they have a before life. They had a life with expectations and the way things were going, and it gets interrupted certainly quite drastically by whatever happens, in your case, GBS. I'm wondering if you can just share a little bit about who you are, what your life was like, what your interests were before GBS, and what you were doing when this difficult journey began.
Absolutely. The first thing I'll say is I'm a Christian, first and foremost, big believer in God and prayer, and those certainly came into play during my hospital stay. Been an athlete all my life. I was an avid bicycle racer at a pretty high level as a young man. I had a very serious accident, which pretty much ended the racing career. Played competitive hockey for years, and as I got older, took up the game of golf and wound up playing on an amateur tour for 5 years. Enjoyed a lot of success to that, thanks to God and the talents that He gave me. I've been a small businessman, worked in the corporate world, ran my own consulting firm for years, wound up again with golf, being an assistant golf pro for a bunch of years, and eventually retired. Happily married, couple of dogs, got a almost 2-year-old golden retriever puppy who is wide open. It's like having a dozen 6-year-olds in the house at the same time. He just play. But really happily married and got a great grandson, wonderful stepson and family, and just happily living my life, enjoying retirement, if you will. And then, got slapped in the face with GBS.
Well, tell us a little bit. Thank you for sharing that, by the way, and just some of the background there. And obviously, when you have been athletic and being able to do the things that you love to do, and to be able to do them at a high level, when something like this comes into play, it's obviously going to be life altering. And so, talk to us just a little bit about, essentially what happened, what gave you the sign that there was a problem, and how did you eventually receive the diagnosis of GBS?
Gosh, that's no one's ever asked me how I received the diagnosis of GBS. That's a good question. But how did it happen? Well, a year ago, right around this time, actually, I got hit with RSV, and I got it pretty badly, actually, and I couldn't shake it. And was on all kinds of medicines, one medicine after another. And then kind of getting over it, but not really. I got a phone call from a friend of mine in the western part of North Carolina up in the mountains saying, "Gee, Miles, a tree has fallen across your driveway. And it's my tree. Could use some help cleaning it up." And I said, "Absolutely." I said, "I'll come up tonight. We'll do it tomorrow morning." I had my stepson and family coming to the mountain house to go skiing that week. And I said to my wife, "I'll just stay there. I'll just, I'll get this tree cleared and kind of clean things up, and I'll just stay."
Right.
So I drove up on a Sunday evening, and, woke up Monday morning. And I had this lisp, which was the weirdest thing. It was like a speech impediment. And I didn't think much of it. I thought, wow, this is a reaction to, one of how much medication I'm taking for RSV. I didn't think a lot of it. And I was out with my neighbor, my buddy, and we cut up this tree, and it was 18 degrees out with a -1 wind chill. It was pretty pleasant, tropical, if you will.
Yeah.
And
right.
We spent hours out there cleaning this tree up, and got it cleaned up, got done, got back in the house. And, I've been running a chainsaw for hours, and I got back in the house and I was like, wow, I'm really tired, and I'm in pretty good shape. I'm 62 years old at the time, but I'm still in pretty good shape. It's weird I'm this tired, but I didn't think much of it. Kind of got cleaned up, and, the lisp was still there, and I discovered I couldn't spit. I lost the opportunity and the ability to spit. You're outside getting a mouthful of sawdust because you're talking to your friend, and I have to reach my finger in to clean out my mouth. And I thought, this is kind of weird. So I got back in the house. I kind of warmed up, and I swear God was sitting on my shoulder because he said, "Miles, you need to go home." And I said, well, here I am getting into an argument with God, which I never win those arguments. Right. And I said, well, no, I need to stay because, family's coming up in a couple days. And God said, no, you really kind of need to go home. Something's not right. So I said, okay, I'm going to go home. So I got my dog and got him in the truck, and I was getting ready to pull out, and God's on my shoulder, and he says, you need to shut this house down. You're not coming back anytime soon. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. I'm coming back in 2 days. And, the little voice saying, no, you really need to shut the house down. Shut it down like you're not coming back for months. And so I got out of the truck. I called my wife and I said, I'm going to be about another half an hour because I'm shutting the house down. My wife's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But I did. And I'm glad I did because I got home. And that night I discovered while eating dinner, I said, wow, not only do I have this lisp and I'm unbelievably tired, I'm having a hard time swallowing my dinner. Now, this has got to be reaction to all the medicine I'm taking. So I go to bed, and at midnight, Monday late night, Tuesday early morning, midnight, literally at like 12:02, I woke up choking. And what I was doing was aspirating on saliva because I couldn't swallow. The ability to swallow was now gone completely, which scared the you-know-what out of me. So I'm up now for the rest of the night, sitting in a chair, spitting into a cup or a paper towel or something. Think of somebody who chews tobacco, for example. I can't swallow. So I called the doctor first thing in the morning, And she says, come in, you're having a reaction to the medicine. I'll give you a Benadryl shot. Big Benadryl shot. So I go in, get the shot, and she says, look, if this isn't better in an hour, you got to come back. I said, okay. So being the typical guy who hates doctors and refuses to go unless he absolutely has to, I wait 2 hours with no improvement. If anything, things are a little bit worse. And my wife says, nope, we're going to the ER. So I go to the ER where I'm promptly misdiagnosed by a PA who says, you've got a problem with your esophagus. Your esophagus is wrong. And by the way, it took them hours to figure that out. So I go home, trying to get back in the truck because my wife drove. I realized I can barely pull myself up into the truck. I'm losing strength frighteningly fast. I get home. We've been in the emergency room for 6 hours now. My wife makes herself dinner. I can't eat because I can't swallow. I can't drink any water because I can't swallow. Wow. I'm basically this guy who's super weak, has a heavy lisp, like a speech impediment, and can't swallow, sitting in a chair. My wife finally says, about 8 o'clock, I'm exhausted, I'm going to bed. Here's my cell phone. Call me. If there's a problem, I'm going to be right on the other side of that wall. I said, no problem. We're going back to the doctor tomorrow, though. About 11 o'clock at night, I got to go to the bathroom because you go to the emergency room, they give you these bags of IV fluid, and it goes in, it eventually has to come out. And I can't get out of the chair. I physically cannot push myself or stand out of a chair. So I call my wife. In about less than 2 seconds, she's standing in front of me saying, what do you mean you can't get out of the chair? And I physically cannot get up. Terrifying. She helps me up, whereupon she promptly drops me. And I'm now on my knees on the floor, and I can't get up. And we eventually work our way up from a small footstool to a bigger footstool to a bigger footstool to a small chair. And I finally get to a point where I'm standing. She helps me get to the men's room. I do what I have to do. And I come out and I lean against the wall and I said, go to the bedroom, pack me a bag. We have to go back to the hospital. And I promise you, I'm not coming home. Something's seriously wrong. Get to the emergency room. The nurse recognizes me from being there earlier and looks at me and says, I'm getting you a wheelchair before you fall down. And I immediately was taken behind and seen by a doctor this time. And by the grace of God and God alone, it was the chief of staff of all the doctors at the hospital. And he looked at me and he said, Mr. Washburn, I think you're having a stroke. Well, the only word I heard was having. And meanwhile, I'm trying to tell him what's going on. My speech has gotten so bad, my wife is acting as an interpreter because the doctor can't understand me. And so my wife is kind of figuring out what I'm saying and telling him. He immediately orders a brain MRI because he thinks I'm having a stroke. That was a pleasant experience, about an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes. And he gave me Robenol to dry up my secretions because I couldn't lie down. Because if I lay down, all the spit would run down into my throat and I'd be choking. Oh. So he dried up all the secretions. It was like blinking with sandpaper because you become so dry. And I get out of the MRI and he's actually waiting for me. And he says, well, Mr. Washburn, the good news is you have a brain with no lesions. The bad news is I don't know what's wrong with you, but we're going to admit you. And this is where I heard it the first time. He said, you have one of four things. You either have Guillain-Barré syndrome, Guillain-Barré syndrome, an exotic tick or flea bite, or something else. And I don't remember what the fourth thing was. The next words out of his mouth were, we're admitting you to the hospital. You're not going home. And where have you been? And so through my interpreter wife, I explained to her I've been to, Beach Mountain, Banner Elk, and Pinehurst. And he goes, no, where have you been? And it occurred to me at that point, he thinks I have an exotic tick or spider bite. And I said, nowhere. And he said, well, I'm going to have you being treated for all four of these things until we figure out what's wrong with you. I actually have 2 open textbooks on my desk, as well as my computer, trying to figure out what's wrong. I'm admitted to the hospital. I don't even realize I'm in the ICU for several days because I didn't know. And they start testing me for everything, CAT scans, spinal tap. The spinal tap was for the Guillain-Barré, because the Guillain-Barré, they rule everything out, and then the Guillain-Barré after a couple of days actually produces some sort of an enzyme in the spinal tap, and that's how they figure it out, along with losing your reflexes. So I'm going on and on about this. Hopefully, I'm going to give you your answer of how I took the news. He comes in a couple days later or so and goes, look at that. That's great news. And I go, well, what's good news? He goes, you've lost your reflexes. And I said, doctor, how is me losing my reflexes good news? He goes, because when I get your spinal tap test back today, it's going to show you have Guillain-Barré, and then we'll know what to treat. Sure enough, several hours later, he comes in, says, you have Guillain-Barré syndrome, and all this medication disappears from that big metal rack that they hang above your bed, hospital bed, with all the bags and medicines hanging down. Because again, I was being treated for 4 different things. Now they're just treating it for Guillain-Barré. And I guess I kind of took it in stride because I didn't know what it was. And I was like, well, if they can treat it, okay, some kind of sickness that will go away. No big deal. They've got their arms around this. I'm in the right place. I had never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what the implications were. And I didn't know what I call the GBS hangover would be like. So I kind of took it in stride in the beginning. Like somebody tells you, you broke your arm, but it's going to be okay. I didn't know what it was. And I think most people, I think a lot of doctors don't know what it is. They spend, a couple hours in med school on it maybe, but it's so rare that they don't come across it very often. I think my physician, I think, told me in 20 years I was her third case. And my neurologist said to me in 20 plus years, I was maybe his fifth or sixth case. He hadn't seen a case in 5 years.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty rare. Huh. It's pretty rare.
Yeah. I was just thinking as you're talking about this in terms of just the time compression part of it, so, I mean, how long between RSV until you were first being told that you have GBS? Like, it didn't sound like much time had passed in total.
Well, I would say maybe a month, because you get sick, mm-hmm. and you think, I got a cold, and maybe I have a sinus infection, and then you have that for 10 days, a couple of weeks. You go, oh gee, this hasn't gone away. Maybe I need to go to the doctor, and you go to your typical walk-in clinic, and they give you all the COVID test and the flu test and the RSV test, and they come out and they say, oh, you have RSV, and then they start giving you medicine. Maybe a month, because of all the respiratory illness, if you will, that led up to it. But from when the symptoms hit, it was very, very fast, because the symptoms hit Monday morning, and I was admitted to the hospital Tuesday morning at about 2 a.m.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. And I just bring that out because you're dealing with these scary and catastrophic symptoms, and they're just kind of cascading, on top of one another with, and like you said, you've had a somewhat of a explanation in your mind that this was just from the medicine or the kind of the after effects of RSV and all that. So it allows you to kind of look past when the list starts and all that. But it is so different for everyone, right? And so I was just thinking about how in my situation, I injured my hips in March of 2011. And then every time it took a year before I got a year and a half before I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis. I won't get into what that is today. My listeners have heard it before. And then it took another year after that to be diagnosed with Crohn's. And I think it's just so different because for me, that was still seemed like life was changing rapidly. So that's what I'm trying to get in my mind, just how rapid this struck you and how much your life changed overnight. And so, kind of how you sound like you were just trying to take it in, trying to grasp it. You're obviously glad it wasn't a stroke. But when do you really kind of come into possession of the knowledge that this is going to be something that I'm going to have to deal with. I'm not just going to be able to have a surgery or take a pill and this is going to be gone. So kind of tell me how you really came to understand that this was going to be something more long-term.
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. And I think that most GBS patients that listen to this, or I talk to them in the future, are going to say the same thing. Probably not until after they got out of the hospital, because nobody really tells you what it is or what you're going to deal with, because they don't know. They don't know enough about it. Now, I will say my neurologist that I had in the hospital was amazing. I remember the day before I left the hospital, he said to me, he goes, and it was just he and I in the room. He came and talked to me when my wife wasn't there. I think he did that on purpose. And he said, look, your Guillain-Barré syndrome doesn't go away. You keep it forever. Now, hopefully it never comes back to bother you. It probably won't. The repeat rate is very, very, very rare. And you have you have a very rare disorder with an extremely rare variance. I have a combination of two variants. One of them is the Miller-Fisher variant, and he told me the other variant that's in there. And quite frankly, I don't remember. GBS is GBS. I mean, it doesn't go away. And he said, you're going to have some after effects that you're going to have to deal with, and hopefully they get better over time. One of them is you're going to get anxiety. You're going to get it. It's going to show up, and it's going to leave as fast as it comes, or it may stay for the rest of the day, and you're not going to understand why. It's because your body is changing. Your immune system is changing. Your emotions are changing. It is what it is. He said the other thing you're going to have to deal with is nerve pain. And I know you understand that. The myelin sheaths around your nerves have been degenerated due to your GBS, and your nerves have been attacked due to GBS, and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt, and you're going to have to deal with that. And pain is something I'm kind of used to from being involved in athletics all my life. You're used to pain. You're used to injuries. You just learn to put up with it. And quite frankly, the nerve pain, any GBS patient will tell you, can be terrible. But I manage it the best I can, and when I don't, I have a prescription that helps. I use gabapentin. Right. That's what I use. I don't want to take a narcotic. The other thing that can be, and this is my wife's word, and it's absolutely perfect, that can be crushing is the chronic fatigue. The fatigue that comes with this, and I imagine it's because your body is always trying to heal. The fatigue it can be crushing. I mean, I can wake up. My wife uses the expression, when you wake up in the morning, it's Cracker Jacks. You open the box and you see what you got. She goes, in your case, you get up in the morning, you have your cup of coffee or two, and you sit down and you watch the news, and you kind of see where you are today, how your body is feeling. And there are days I have where it's kind of like nothing ever happened. I feel kind of normal. Then there are days that I'm really, really tired. Yeah, but you kind of get through it. You work through it. You get through it. And then there are the days that it's the crushing fatigue, where I look at my wife and I say, nothing is happening today. I'm going to sit in this chair. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to watch mindless TV. And eventually this fatigue will leave. But until it does, there's nothing happening. So it is absolutely life-changing. And as an athlete, I remember I was in the hospital, and I had this really nice lady who was, I don't know, I want to say my age, but she'd probably reel back at that. I'm sure she was younger. And she could tell I was having a hard time. And it wasn't with a hard time with being the physical therapy. It was a hard time kind of figuring out what was going on with my body. And she said, "Are you okay?" And I looked at her and I said, whatever her name was, I don't remember. I said, at one time in my life, I was an elite athlete in 2 different sports. I've been to the national championships in 2 different sports. And here I am, I can barely move my arms and legs. I'm kind of having a hard time with that today. And she got it. She understood that. And that actually helped me a lot, because she just sat there. My physical therapy session was that day we just sat and talked. And that was probably the first time I ever talked about GBS and what it was doing to me and how I was going to cope with it. Another gentleman came to see me probably that same day in the afternoon, and she very well could have sent him, was a pastor. And a gentleman knocked on my door. Of course, I really can't move. I'm like, come in. Again, I'm hardly able to move. And the guy walks in and he sits down. Never seen the guy in my life. He sits down and he said to me, before he even introduced himself to me, he said, "Do you feel like God has left you?" And I said, "Absolutely not." I said, "God is in this room with me right now. He has never left my side. He will never leave my side. And he is right now he's carrying me because I can't stand on my own." And he introduced himself as a hospital pastor who, goes from room to room. And to this day, he and I are still friends. Matter of fact, I spoke with him yesterday for half an hour, just shooting the breeze. And he told me he did not expect me to say that. He actually said that to me yesterday. We were talking about it. And he said, I never expected you to answer that way because most people will feel like God has left. And I said, no, God never left me. And I said to him yesterday, I said, I think, Guillain-Barré has been laid upon my shoulders so that I can do something good with it. And I said, I really wish that maybe he had given me something else that wasn't so severe. But if that's my purpose, then so be it. I will manage it with God's help, and I will do God's work with it, which is what we're doing with Miles for GBS.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to pick up on just a couple of different things that you shared. First of all, I think I want to say something about the pastor who came into your room, and I'm glad to hear that the intent in asking the question wasn't malicious. And I would think with a hospital chaplain, it wouldn't normally be.
Not at all. No.
Yeah, but we have listeners who have been, that question has been asked almost in an accusing way. It sounds like he was trying to investigate where you were spiritually and how he could come alongside you.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's really good. And I'm really glad to hear about your continued relationship with him. And that sounds like it's really special. And thank God for empathetic other caretakers like the physical therapist that was in your life at such a critical time, as well. I did want to ask, and this is kind of funny because I want to alter the question a little bit. I don't think it should be any shock to our listeners that we come up with some questions we want to use beforehand just to set kind of sign markers for our conversation. But the original question is, are there common misconceptions you've encountered that you'd like to clear up? But I realized that as you're talking about how few people even know what heard of GBS or what it is, it might be hard to have a misconception if you don't even have any familiarity with it at all. So maybe a better way to ask that is just simply to say, as you have talked to people about it, what have people misunderstood or has been frustrating in your communication with others that's just been difficult for people to grasp, if that makes sense?
It does. And I think I will say a common misperception is that it's something else. And the people, maybe the doctors or the PAs or whomever, don't realize, and the patients probably don't either, the massive muscle weakness and muscle fatigue that happens while you're losing your strength and losing the ability to move, I think is often misdiagnosed. My college roommate, I came to find out after the fact, he lost his father to GBS. He went to the hospital with the massive fatigue and the symptoms of RSV or what have you, and wound up on a ventilator and passed. And I think the real thing people need to watch out for is the massive fatigue. It's I remember saying to my wife, I'm in good shape. I don't understand why I'm so weak. That's the symptom that I think people and doctors miss. They think, oh, I'm just tired. But it literally is a massive fatigue where simply raising your arm is exhausting. Trying to move your legs is absolutely exhausting. And that would be the symptom I would probably be telling people to be aware of. I think that might answer the first part of your question. I think the second part of your question is what are the misconceptions other people have? Is that what it was?
Yeah, just in terms of misunderstandings that you've
Misunderstanding.
encountered when you've tried to talk and share
Sure.
about what you were going through, that sort of thing.
I think a lot of the times people just don't understand. They don't understand what it's like when you say, I'm just so tired. I'm exhausted. I can't do it. Um, because they say, well, did you sleep okay? Yeah, I got my usual sleep. They don't, sometimes they just don't understand that you just can't do it today. And if they give you a little, I, I do what my neurologist said. If people don't understand, I simply say, look, I'm not asking you to understand. I'm just telling you I can't do it. And I will walk away, because the neurologist said, you've got to get away from people that don't understand. There are times when the nerve pain does get bad, and I manage pain well, but there are times when it really does hurt, and I simply can't do stuff, and that's when I take a gabapentin or two, and I just, if people give me static, where we're going to go and do this stuff today, I can't do it. I'm blessed. I mean, I am blessed. I have surrounded myself with some really good support, people who do love me and care and understand and get it and don't give me static. But I think that the average person, because they don't know about GBS and they don't know the long term effects that a recovering patient can have, I can see how it would be easy to misunderstand and say, oh, well, he just doesn't want to do it, so he's using this as an excuse. Um, but the recovery time for some patients can be weeks or months. It could be decades. Every patient recovers differently because everybody's body is different. And while GBS does kind of the same thing to us, it does it to various degrees. And then there's the
Hmm.
various variants that do things. I'm blessed. I know two other GBS patients. One of them doesn't want to talk about it, and another one, I've spent a lot of time talking with her about it. But she had very different. She had the same fatigue and paralysis that I have had, but she had different beginning symptoms. So it's kind of interesting to speak with her about it. And our recovery is similar but different because everybody's different. And that's what makes GBS hard, I think, for doctors and caregivers, because her recovery is different from mine.
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out because even with, like you said, within the same diseases, and I've experienced that with mine as well, ankylosing spondylitis. Some people have their lives just completely changed to the point of being disabled and having to give up careers. My situation, though it was a systemic disease, is a systemic disease and has affected my body a lot. I've been able to continue in my career, and not everyone's able to do that. But I did want to just make a remark on the chronic fatigue, like you said, that maybe people don't understand. I would say that I've had chronic fatigue, with this disease. But what turned out for me in my case was undiagnosed sleep apnea. So that changed my life when I finally got that, diagnosed. But I would say before that, I would have told people that despite the amount of pain that I've been in, the fatigue was actually worse because the fatigue
Yes.
just robs you of any desire,
Yes.
to be able to do anything. The level of fatigue you're talking about, the only time I've experienced that was the first time I got COVID. I remember my arms being tired washing my hair and, trying to, and walking across my kitchen floor and being, almost out of breath and just, needing to collapse. And of course, that was a little scary for me since I was also immunocompromised and I did get special treatment at the hospital because of that. But not to dive into that, I'm just saying I think that those who've gone through something similar at any point in their journey understand what you're saying, that can be the most debilitating part, of it all. And so I thank you for sharing about that. You've mentioned, purpose. You've mentioned that God has a purpose for you in this. And so I want to move on to that in this part of our conversation at this point and talk about how that purpose developed for you and how it really came into focus.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I'm going to go back to my previous life as a bicycle rider. Um, was very, very successful as a younger man, and was fortunate enough to make a couple of U.S. regional teams, and and raced for one of the top sponsors in the country. And I was very, very blessed, a lot of success. And my wife and I went to France over the summer. Um, I took her there to, she was so good to me when I was in the hospital. I told her, I said, let's go on a vacation. I got cleared by my doctor to travel. And so I took her to France. And my brother was out there with his wife, so we met up with them. And both my wife and my brother said, "Oh, you should ride up Mount Ventoux. You're a past bicycle racer. It's been made famous by the Tour de France. You should do this." And I looked at them and I said, "Do you guys have any idea how hard that's going to be? And the training just to do it, the training involved. It's the third hardest climb in the world. It's been made famous by the Tour. It's, made some of the best bike racers in the world just collapse. I mean, no, I'm not doing that. You're nuts." And so, of course, they stick that idea in the back of my head, and they're like, "Oh, you should do this because you're a bike rider. This would be fun." And I'm like, "No, it's not going to happen." And so we come back from France, and I'm going back and forth between the mountains and doing some things. And I was driving back from the mountains. I was by myself. It was me and the dog in the truck, and I'm driving back from the mountains. And I'm thinking, boy, that would be kind of a neat experience, but I'm not going to do it. I really don't want to, I don't even own a bike right now. I got rid of my bike a while ago. I just don't want to do this. It's just too much. And that little voice was sitting on my shoulder again, a little voice of God. And I'm driving home in the truck. So I guess you could say I was praying about it because I was talking to God. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Well, you should ride up Mount Ventoux. It'd be good." And I'm like, "I'm not going up Mount Ventoux." And here I am. I'm arguing with God again. And every time I argue with God, I lose. I mean,
right.
I don't know why I try. And he said, he goes, "You should do this as a fundraiser for the GBS Foundation." And the next song that came on the radio was a song with the title, "Don't Give Up." And I almost drove the truck off the road. I really did. It blew me away. I was about 15 minutes from the house, walked in the house, told my wife the story, and she goes, "Well, that's it." I said, "What do you mean that's it?" She goes, "Well, that's what we're doing. God has told us to do that. This is what we're going to do." We've been going 110 miles an hour forward with this since. Contacted the GBS CIDP Foundation, spoke with them multiple times at great length, and discovered that they actually have a fund in the foundation that goes strictly to patients in need. And it doesn't go to research. It doesn't go to buy copy machines and pencils and paper. It doesn't go for scholarships. It doesn't go for salaries. 100% of the money goes to patients in need. For example, if there's a patient out there who's getting out of the hospital and needs a wheelchair and doesn't have the wheelchair, if they contact the GBS Foundation, and I'm sure they have to jump through some hoops to prove they have GBS and all that fun stuff. But once all that's done, there's money there to help them. That had a lot of appeal to me because I'm very blessed. I keep saying it, but it's true. I've been very blessed throughout my entire working career as well. I've made some good choices, and God has pointed me in the right direction, and I've been very successful. And when the neurologist said, "Miles, you're going to need this, 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 and this during your recovery," I looked at my wife and I said, "Go buy it." And it occurred to me during this drive home with my conversation with God that there's an awful lot of people out there who can't say to their wives or their husbands, "Go buy it."
Yeah.
So I spoke with the foundation at great length, and I said, "I'm willing to do this fundraiser, but all the money has to go to recovering patients. Every dollar, 100%. And they said, "Okay." And I answered the question before they asked it. And the question I'm sure was, "Well, how are we going to fund the fundraiser?" And I told them I would eat all the expenses myself. And I have eaten every expense there is for this fundraiser. And I'm very deep, needless to say, between equipment and airfare and, a house and my support team and all the stuff that goes with it. But I do believe God has put this on my shoulders to help recovering patients in need, because our job as Christians are to give back. And one of the things Of course, I've been selling sponsorships. If you want to have your name on my jersey, it costs X dollars. But one of the things I'm putting on my jersey and I'm putting on my shoulders is 1 Peter 4:10. And I would encourage you, and you might already know what it is, David, but I would encourage you or your Andres or your listeners to look up 1 Peter 4:10. And I am using my gift from God, which is athletics, to help people in God's name.
Yeah. That's a very inspiring story, and one in which I know you're giving God the glory because of the way, first of all, you've acknowledged He gave you the abilities, the gifts, as well as, in this case, the calling to go and to do this. And I want to say something too, just about your heart, because where the financial part wasn't the big struggle for you, but yet you're able to recognize what a privilege or a blessing that was, and recognize that there are a lot of people out there that this could be financially devastating for, or just keep them from getting what they need, like a wheelchair or something like that. And so that's very moving to me, as well. And then what you're taking on, Mount Ventoux, is that how you said it?
Yes, Mount Ventoux.
Okay, Mount Ventoux, and what an exciting challenge, and something that we're going to be praying for you about, and your success in that. And my understanding is you're not riding alone. Is that correct?
It is correct. My when I decided to do what God is telling me to do and stopped arguing with him, I reached out to my cycling coach from back in the day. His name is Bill Humphreys. He's known as the bike guy worldwide.
Okay.
He's been in cycling, you name it, he's done it. He's written some books. His books are available on Amazon. The Jersey Project and What If, and it's about his life and how he went from, using his words, being a hippie to being a world-class athlete inside of 1-2 years. And so I called him, and he and I have remained friends and in touch since I was in my 20s. And I said, Bill, basically Reader's Digest condensed story. And I said, I want to write up Mount Ventoux as this fundraiser. And I want you to coach me. And he said, Miles, I'm 82 years old. You know how to do this. And I said, yeah, I do. I know how to train, but I was a sprinter, not a mountain climber. And now I'm going to go from being, a very high level sprinter to a mountain goat. I know how to do this, but I could, use pointing in the right direction.
Sure.
And he said, absolutely. I will absolutely do this. And so we meet on a regular basis on the phone and talk, because he's in Connecticut, actually. I'm in North Carolina. And about a month later, he and I were on the phone, and he said, I gotta tell you something. And I thought, I'm doing something wrong. And he said, I'm not going to train you to go up this incredible mountain for this journey of yours without going myself. And I brought a tear to my eye. I mean, guy's 82 years old. He's done everything there is to do in cycling, and he's going to ride up the mountain with me. And he said, using his words, you're going to ride away from me, but I'm still going to do it. And I'm going to wear your jersey while I'm doing it. Another one of my teammates, I mentioned I was a sprinter. Well, every good sprinter has got a great lead out man to help you in the races to get you across the finish line first. And my great lead out man, Tom Riley, has told me he's going to ride the mountain with me. Now he's 60 years old, and he has MS. So
wow.
he is going to overcome his MS. And so the three of us are all training in 3 different states. And, he also says he's going to wear the jersey. And again, I might ride away from him, but he's still going to do it. There's been a lot of support there. I've got a support team. My brother, my nephew, my wife, they're all going to be out there to make sure we're all getting our nutrition and our water. In August, it could be hot. To help do it. My doctor, I joke with my doctor saying she's on the support team, but she's obviously not going, but she's been great. I mean, she made sure I had a lot of tests, medical tests, before she cleared me to be able to do this. She's watching me closely. My wife is amazing. She's my nutritionist. She's my, an inspiration, motivator, full of faith, keeping me doing it. So, and my sponsors. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank my sponsors, and give a little commercial for the CETA Foundation, for Callahan and Rice Insurance, for Heart Pine Builders, Camino Development, Talamore Golf Resorts, Delta Leathercraft, Infinite Space Quilting. These are all people who have given all kinds of money to the GBS CIDP Foundation for patients to recover, patients in need. They have the faith that I can do this, and the faith in the foundation to continue helping recovering patients. And David, to me, I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, you've got a big heart, you've got this, and you've got that." David, I don't want any of that. It's not about me. It's not about Miles Washburn. It's about God, and it's about the patient. To me, it is every day. I think, what more can I do to try to help patients in need? And to me, that's what it's about. It's about helping the patients in need.
Yeah, amen. Well, I'm just inspired to hear about your team. What a great story. And you could make a movie about the three of you riding up that mountain. But like you said, I know it's not about you. But go ahead.
I want to add one more thing, if I could.
Yeah.
There's a lot of patients out there, and some people at GBS who are going to listen to this and going, "Wow, this guy's the exception. He's riding up this big mountain. He's the exception." And I would come back and I would say, I'm not an exception. I'm blessed. But what I want to do is I want to inspire that person that look at this mountain as a symbol of faith, resilience, and the ability to climb towards recovery for everybody affected by GBS or any other chronic debilitating, syndrome. I would say to the person, I want you to think about me riding up that mountain for you, that today, reach deep, take the extra 10 steps. I know it hurts. I know it's hard. I know you're tired. Tomorrow, try to walk to the end of your driveway and walk back. Next day, try to walk to your mailbox. Then maybe you need to take a rest. The next day, try to walk to your neighbor's house. It simply is really a symbol of recovery. And the mountain, this huge mountain of recovery that we all have to try to overcome. And that's really what it stands for.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, that helps. And I think it'll mean a lot to people, whatever perspective they're listening from with their chronic health issues. They can be encouraged to do the next thing that's before them to do, and not to give up, like you said about the song earlier. Now, we don't want people trying to look up a Bible verse if they're listening to this while they're driving. We do. I do want to read that 1 Peter 4:10 passage here. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. And so thank you to our producer, Andres, in sharing that so I could read it to you at this point. One last thing for us to do, Miles, very important, is give us where you are in your fundraiser, what the deadline is, in other words, when the race is, and how people can get involved in sharing, donating, or any of those things.
Sure, David. That's very important, and I appreciate you putting that out there. So it's not a race; it's simply an event. It's three old guys going up this big mountain for the recovering patients of GBS, and it's going to be on August 24th of 2026. That gives all three of us plenty of time to train, for me to make all the available arrangements, house, photographer, vehicles, all that fun stuff. It's to get involved, if you will. My Facebook page is Miles for GBS. On that Facebook page, there's a link. You can go to my website. It's long. It's go.gbs-cidp.org/ GBS26. That takes you right to my webpage, but it's easier just to go to Facebook, if you will. You can donate from there. And I would tell everybody that, sure, I've had some donors give thousands of dollars, which has been wonderful and a blessing. But there's also donors that have given $10. And I will say that every single dollar that you donate makes a difference. It makes a difference.
Sure. Absolutely.
Know that, if somebody donates $10 or $5 or $5,000, whatever, they're changing somebody's life that can't afford the wheelchair. Maybe they can't afford the physical therapy. Maybe they lost their job and lost their insurance, and they can't afford the speech therapy. One of the things that got badly affected by GBS is my tongue. And it's behaved during this podcast for the most part, which is pretty good. But very often I have a hard time trying to get a word out or trying to make a word, because the tongue was the first thing that went for me when that speech impediment. And so I get what I call GBS mouth. And sometimes I struggle with that a little bit. So, that every donation that we raise, where are we? Our goal is 60,000. I'd like to do more than that. Right now, our little thermometer is saying 39,065 right now.
That's awesome.
Although I will say that I have secured a major company recently. We just haven't announced it yet for all the legalities we have to jump through the hoops for. But they're a $10,000 donation.
Oh, wow.
I just can't say who they are yet. So while my thermometer says 39, we're actually at 49. But I still like to pretend that we're way behind where we need to be and ask everybody to please go to Miles for GBS and donate what they can. I'm not asking people to give up their life fortune or mortgage their house, but every little bit helps, David. If everybody gave $2, think how much money we'd raise and how much good it can do for the people who need it.
That's right. And I appreciate that for a couple of reasons. One is because, first of all, everyone can participate, whatever they have a lot of money or a little money. And that means a lot for people with, chronic illness, and maybe their budgets are strained because of their own medical situation. And we never want to burden someone and make them go into debt more. But the fact that you could be encouraged to give $10, most of us can do that, right? And maybe you can give more. And if you're able to give more, we encourage you to do so. Broken and Mended and In the Seams are certainly supportive and behind you in this effort. We will put all the links that you've been talking about in our show notes. And again, for people driving, you can wait till you get home and then click on it. But anyway, Miles, want to just thank you so much for being with us today and sharing about your story, your journey, and your cause.
Thank you. And, one of the last things people can do to also help is maybe somebody can't afford to give. And I understand that. I really do. But what they can do is they can forward my page, my Facebook page, right. Miles for GBS. They can put it on their Facebook page. They can forward it to their friends and say, hey, look, this is a great cause. If you can't give, forward. And the more people we reach out to, the more people we touch. The interesting thing is we're going to eventually touch some people who have GBS or other chronic diseases. And they're going to see your podcast and they're going to listen to it and they're going to reach out. And, the more awareness we can give, it's just as good as raising the money.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Miles. It's been great to have you. It's been a great conversation. It encourages and edifies me, and I know it will our listeners as well. Certainly, reminder to our listeners, you can go to brokenandmended.org to see what resources we have available for you there to support you on your chronic illness or chronic pain journey. Including our support groups. And we don't have support groups everywhere in the U.S. yet, but we do have virtual options for people that need to join from a place where we don't have a group. And so, but there's also our Facebook group there. You can find our podcast there, which you already know where the podcast is if you're listening to this. But anyway, there are a lot of different resources people can tap in there as well. Check out the links we're going to leave in regards to GBS, the foundation that we've been talking about, and also Miles' story and his Facebook page. We'll put all that in here as well. So thank you to our listeners again for being with us, and we will see you next time on In the Seams.